I should have your paper to you later today.
Oh,
all right, and the way I'm doing this, I'm checking basically everything.
Yes.
Okay, from grammar to order as it is.
Yeah.
So right now, the tendency, I'm putting a lot of comments, a lot of feedback, more of the feedback that I've been doing so far, and then I'm assigning a grade. Now the way that I'm grading is I'm going to give you a grade for each product. Okay, so you'll have an individual grade for the literature review. You'll have one for the results and discussion section, the method section, and so on. And I'm going to be giving you obviously feedback for each of those grades. Now the idea is what I'd like for you to do, for all of you to do, is to, based on my feedback and our discussions, is to make the changes. All right. You're going to have until May 23rd to make all the changes for each individual product. So, you're going to have until May 23rd to make these changes. But I would encourage you to make those changes now while the literature review is still fresh in your mind. But you have until the 23rd to make these changes. The grade that I give you on the individual product is the grade that I would assign, thinking as if I were a señor, if I were an examiner at the end of the semester, what expectation I would have, because I want to prepare all of you to know what to expect. So the grade that I give for each individual project will be subject to change based on the first draft that's due May 23rd. I'm going to review the entire document on May 23rd and look at your whole product and expect, changes. Expect that the changes that I suggested, that you do those changes, and then I will modify the grade, whatever grade you get for the final draft. If you make those changes and improve your work, I will go back and adjust the individual grades for each individual project. All right, I don't want to penalize you for giving you, for making the changes and ending up with a good product. The end result here, the main thing is that you end up with a good product. So it's very important that you first understand the feedback that I give. If you're not sure, obviously we can talk about it in our tutoring sessions. You can send me emails and we can discuss those changes, but we now need to focus on other areas of your research as we get closer to your own investigation.
Yes, teacher.
All right, so don't stress out too much about the grade and the amount of feedback, with the understanding that you're going to have time to make those changes. Okay? So I just want to throw that out, and I should have your paper to you later today.
Okay.
Now,
Nice.
we have 4 weeks. We're starting week 6 now. We have 4 weeks now to design instruments. So now we need to be looking very closely at our research questions and ask ourselves which types of instruments and the procedure, what types of data do I need to answer my research questions. All right. So what I've done here is I copied and pasted what your research questions are at this point. And I want to stress too that, in fact, in your case too, we may want to look at modifying them a little bit to have a little bit of a clearer idea as to which instruments will serve your purposes.
Yes.
For this, for your thesis. Now, you have 2 research questions here. One is, how do students assign roles to classmates when participating in literature reviews? And the second, how do students feel when they mediate literature circles? Now, we have to be thinking about what types of instruments and what type of data that do we need to address these questions. The first one, how do students assign roles? And then the second one, how do students feel when they mediate literature circles? So let's take the first question and look at this idea of assigning roles. And in the second question, you have mediate literature review. Maybe think about a way to merge these two ideas, because I have another idea for your second question. And It's not different. It's basically the same thing as what we've talked about, but I think it'll help us think more clearly about the instruments.
Okay.
So, how about something like merging? How do students use language to mediate how they mediate leadership roles, or how is language used to mediate discussions around the assignments of roles, something like that. Now this is being recorded, so you can go back and look at it and think about how you want to word it, but I'm thinking merging these two ideas about assigning roles and mediation. And obviously this also comes in social cultural theory, social cultural constructivism, a lot of your theory, communities of practice also kind of are all in there, okay? But we're looking specifically at assigning roles and the mediation of language, and you transcribing, listening to language, and seeing what words or phrases are being used to assign these, to direct these roles that students fall into. Now we have this other second question here, and we have mentioned before something about the teacher's role, or how does the teacher dictate these are your roles, or do the students decide themselves, or somewhere in between? So I think we need a second question that represents
that part.
The role of the teacher in some degree.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now these are all suggestions, right? So you tell me if this is in focus of what you want.
It is very appropriate.
Okay.
Because I was thinking on this: who assigned the role, teacher or students? How did the students establish the roles? Who participates or spoke or speak more time? Who participate less time?
Right. All those questions fall under these.
I have a question.
Yeah.
These questions can be included inside the instruments.
Yeah, we'll talk about those.
Questions?
Right. We'll talk about those in a few minutes. But yes,
okay,
they can. Now the second research question is: we need something about something like. Let's think here. How do teachers and let's see. How do teachers interact, or how do teachers allow students? What is the teacher's role in setting up student roles within a literature circle, or how do teachers mediate? Because you can look at a teacher mediating. So how does a teacher mediate the process of students assigning roles during a literature circle, or in a literature circle? So we could also throw in the word mediation and think of the teacher as a mediator, and what role is that? So you're going to be trying to find cases where obviously students are assigning roles, or at least they're participating in setting up roles themselves, and also teachers and saying something. So you're going to need both. You're going to need two situations where one, the teacher is intervening and really either dictating or at least facilitating or mediating the process. So they're involved in some degree. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are only saying, okay, you're going to be the team leader, you're the questioner, you're the summarizer. It's maybe they're giving suggestions. And then the students are either taking that suggestion or they're deciding something on their own. Okay? So this is kind of the situation you need to find when you observe, so that you can answer both of these questions. One is student-led only, with basically no teacher intervention or little teacher intervention. and another where a teacher there is some role. Okay, and again, it's not so much the teacher. What you really don't want, I don't think, is just where the teacher dictates. Okay, you are going to do this. But they're helping. That the teacher is intervening and guiding the students, and then you can kind of see to what point the teacher is influencing and what the students can do on their own, that type of thing. Okay, so I think all of this lies in to your. I think it aligns with your theory that you have currently in your literature review, and at least for me anyway, these two questions, talking in terms of these latest modifications, I think we can start talking now about the instrument design a little bit more concretely.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we need to be thinking about the types of data sources. What type of data and how can we obtain different information? Because the goal here is, in fact, I uploaded a page which I'm going to send out an announcement in Canvas on triangulation. And this is what we need to do, is triangulate our information so that we have valid information, that we see the same phenomena from different perspectives. All right, so one is well, the first thing is you're going to need to have to find a situation, right? You need to find a way to some teachers that are using literature circles, and I think you mentioned you have a couple of teachers in mind.
I have a couple of teachers in mind, but we discussed last class that it may be much more appropriate to use only one and observe inside that class like 2 literature circles.
Okay.
And I was talking with the teacher, and we are like having some time to plan the activity. Also, I would like to give like the teacher the freedom to develop the class, and in a single class let the students read the article or the text, and on the same class let them develop the discussion. The teacher mentioned that she has 2 hours, 2 classes together of reading, so she said it would be appropriate to do it that day, because if the activity takes more time, you didn't like stop the activity, so students can take the time to discuss. Am I clear?
Yes. Because one of the questions that the examiners might ask you is, why did you choose that teacher? So you need to have a reason why you chose this one particular teacher, and we can think in terms of doing a case study on this one teacher. Okay, so it'll be a case study, but be thinking about why you chose this teacher, and and think of it in terms of your literature review, and so think about I don't know what level they're teaching. And if they're, I don't know, for example, maybe this particular group, there's a difficulty in reading, and this teacher's using literature circles to help solve a particular problem that this teacher can face. Just and maybe you need an interview where you record the interview and ask the teacher why that he or she uses literature reviews. I'm sorry, literature circles, and just kind of some general background about the teacher and to this activity type, so that you can put together some ideas, because you will need to mention it briefly. I would mention it briefly in your presentation, but they may ask you. In fact, if you don't mention it, they're likely to ask you. So I would try to include a brief discussion, very, very short, but that you give a reason why you chose this particular teacher. Again, thinking why he or she's using literature circles, that type of thing. And I think you can get that information from an initial interview. Maybe have a formal interview where you record it and you just ask kind of some general questions about this teacher, because since this is a case study, we're going to need to know a little bit about the context of this person, the class, the school, the type of class that he or she has in general, right? Is it general English? Is it what level? What problems?
Is that I choose the teacher because the subject is reading. here in the VA.
Okay, so it's in the BA.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's teaching reading to propedeutical students. So.
Okay, so.
However, she asked me how she would develop literature circles because she didn't know.
Okay, so we can treat this then, and this is another aspect of your method, because now we're thinking, and we're starting our instrument designs, but it's technically we're starting our method section. Okay, so we need to be thinking of our participants, the instruments, and the procedure all together as we talk about the design of your instruments over the next 3-4 weeks. Now, sorry, I lost my train of thought. When you talk to, okay, so we're going to be treating this as an intervention, and you mentioned, which I agree with, that you don't want to intervene too much. So I would try to give her or him, is it a woman? Okay, is it okay? So I would give her as much freedom as she wants or needs. But if this is her first time using literature circles, obviously you're going to be inputting something. So whatever you input, you need to have a record of. So that's part of the data collection. So what you tell the teacher, or what you suggest, whatever you discuss with the teacher, you need to record it. You need it, whether it's in writing or whether it's spoken. If it's spoken, then we're talking about recording and audio. Right? So that's a key part of, in a sense, the data collection, right? So how you intervene, because you're going to be talking about this in your procedure very explicitly. It's a short paragraph, it's not a lot of text, but you need to be very explicit as to how you intervened, the process in which that you collected the data, and also in this case intervened. Not everyone's having an intervention, but in your case you will be doing an intervention. Okay, so that
the intervention would be like in the planning, right? Well, not in the planning, like in presenting the teacher the activity.
Right. So for example, you might have an interview. I would start with an interview. Sit down with the teacher and record it, and find out. I would start off by asking the teacher about her and her experience with reading and the types of activities. Just kind of very general, try to get an idea of the type of class that he or she has, how many students, and so on. And then start shifting the conversation into literature circles to get a feel for what she understands about literature circles, how literature circles may or may not relate to what she's already doing, and then you, based on what she tells you, based on how much, because she may be doing something very similar. That's why you want to talk to her first and get to know her and find out what she's doing in the classroom to help reading, and then you tie in what she knows with literature circles, and so it could be very much, it's very possible that it's just very similar to what she's already doing and that you call it something different, or maybe it is in fact something completely new. But I would recommend first kind of listening and finding out what the teacher knows and is doing currently, so that hopefully you can tie into this new concept of literature circles into what she's already doing and what she already knows. Okay, so you're going to have to then, depending on what she knows, you're going to be talking about what the planning of a literature circle. So not so much the purpose. You're not really describing or explaining to her so much why she is doing this. It's more about how. Now, if she really, I don't know if she's going to want a justification. Hopefully not. But if she wants a justification, I would try to stick to just trying to help her to do it. That you might say, well, this is to help them interact more. And I think the why is pretty obvious, but just try to give her as much freedom as possible in doing it, and that you base everything that you need from the literature circle hopefully on what she already is doing. Okay. So it's not something really totally foreign or something new, or you don't want it to be a burden on the teacher. You don't want it to be problematic or difficult. That difficult. You want it to be something that she feels comfortable doing, because if it's something really, really out of the ordinary, it may not give you the results that you need, and it may even turn out, Fernando, that this is not the best teacher to do it. I don't know. I'm just thinking all the possible scenarios. So when you have that final interview, you need to decide, first of all, okay, is this teacher, am I comfortable with it? Do you feel that she feels comfortable with doing this? That's like the first decision. So based on the results of this interview, this will, I think, it should give you a rationale as to why you chose this teacher. Okay. And you can also obviously talk about the rationale being it's part of the BA and it's part of the curriculum.
It can be in the first language, like natural interview, because she's my she works in here, but she's my co-worker at the primary school I'm working. She's working in the primary school, so every day we see each other at like 1.5, like for 5 minutes. That may be the appropriate situation in which I interview her, like in Spanish.
Okay, so two questions. The first question you're asking is if you should conduct the interview in English or Spanish. And the second is when should you apply the interview?
Yes.
All right. So the first question, I would recommend you doing it in English, just because you're gonna have to translate a lot otherwise. And I mean, if you think that the language is a barrier, okay, if you think that it might cause a problem, go ahead and conduct it in Spanish. But you're gonna have to translate everything. You're gonna have to say it in Spanish and English. And for students, it's probably more likely that some of you will be interviewing in Spanish, and I understand that. But for a teacher,
English.
You decide, but it gets it's a lot of work too to translate everything. So, but just see how it goes. If you see like it's really struggling, like there's a problem, or something's not really clear. If she switches to Spanish, then take that information, obviously.
Okay.
But I was just thinking, from your standpoint, it might be a little bit easier to do it all in English. But I'll leave that up to you, English or Spanish. So the second part, really, you decide when is going to be more appropriate. If you have more time in the other school, that there's, that she is less busy there, or maybe you don't want to inconvenience her, so you have to kind of decide and talk to her and say, look, when are you free? And when can we get together for maybe a half an hour, 20 minutes? This first interview you might keep short, but just ask her and see when's the most appropriate time for her. And just remind yourself, you don't want to be a burden on her, but also she needs to give you the information you need. So sometimes, right, I'm thinking of all the worst case scenarios, she keeps saying, no, but mañana, or kind of putting off the interview or putting off the information. You need to decide fairly quickly if this is the ideal person, because here's the risk, and we talked about this before.
Yes.
With a case study with only one teacher, you're at that person's. This person is really, can dictate whether or not you're going to get the information or not. If there's a problem with that teacher or the availability or the classes, then it's not the same as having two other teachers just in case, right on the side. So.
And I talked with the other reading teacher, because one propedeutico has one reading teacher and the other has another one, and the other also agreed to let me participate in their group.
So I think there's nothing wrong with having two interviews, one with each teacher. Okay, and then at least the two interviews, and then decide if you want to go really with one teacher
or with the other,
or with the other teacher. and then and just see what type of information you get, because then that would also help you in explaining the rationale behind choosing one teacher over the other. They're going to say, why'd you choose this teacher over the other teacher? And then you can explain, well, I did for these reasons, see? And you chose Prope because students are just getting into the university. Maybe in Mexico there's not a tendency to read a lot, so there you have a reason. You have a reason for choosing. You chose the BA because reading is very important for the other skills, etc. Right?
And also they are like the most appropriate students to show proficient, because they are like expecting to be future teachers. So
right, and they can learn too from the examples of their own activities they can think of in terms of being a teacher doing the same. So those are the kinds of answers, those are the kinds of things you need to be thinking about when you explain that later on. So interviews, we also need to be thinking about, and I say interviews, it could be you're going to probably have an initial interview and then maybe one or two later, maybe one during the process of applying different literature reviews, or probably for sure at the end of the I think you were talking about 2 literature reviews that you're going to apply. So you may have one after each one, right? Now you're going to be recording. If you're looking at small groups, okay, you're going to be recording those, let's say 2 groups, right, in that one class. So you'll need 2 recording devices, okay, and located in such a way that you can listen to all the groups. So maybe the 2 groups aren't right next to each other, so you don't kind of get confused, right? So they're probably at opposite ends of the room. That's what I would recommend. So these are things you can talk with the teacher about. You can talk to the teacher about how you're going to choose the 2 groups. And again, you need to have a rationale. Why did you choose these 2 groups to record and collect data on regarding the literature circles? Is it based on, I don't know, it could be based on just their teacher's recommendation, based on their performance. And when I say based on their performance, it could be that maybe the groups are a good heterogeneous group. That is, you have 2 groups that have really strong students, some very weak. Maybe they're not heterogeneous, they're homogeneous. Okay, so they're more or less the same level, but the teacher can help you with this. The teacher's going to say, well, these groups, and you might even intervene as far as how the groups are divided up. But these are things you need to think about. And I'm not saying it should be one way or the other, but you need to be able to articulate and explain why you chose those 2 groups.
I was thinking only one camera on one side, and in that maybe video recording, and the other maybe use a cell phone, because I think 2 cameras maybe like very
it can be intimidating.
Intimidating.
Now
and
you don't have
like
to use
audio recording, like I expect them not to notice the audio recording, like.
Yeah, and you might choose just 2 individual audio recordings. Maybe you don't even have a video, right? Because what you're really measuring in this particular case with these research questions is the language. You're not really looking so much for nonverbal communication or things that would be obvious in a video. You're really just looking at the language. You're going to listen to what they say, how they interact. Are some students dominating the conversation, etc. And looking for those cases where things are being mediated as far as how decisions are being made as to who is taking on what role and what roles that they are assuming, how are they performing those roles. So even though we're talking about how do students choose these roles, you are interested too in their level of participation in that role. So yeah, think about that. It could be just audio. You could just have two cell phones, right?
Yeah.
Or two audio devices, and probably not even use video.
Yeah.
Because even if the teacher comes in and intervenes, we need to be able to hear the teacher within the context of the group. So hopefully that same recording device will capture when the teacher comes in and intervenes and talks. Now when you observe, you're going to be looking at maybe how the teacher is positioning himself or herself around the room, because a teacher can mediate just by standing right next to the group and not say a thing. So you might be able to, that's something that you can observe. You can take time and say, okay, how is the teacher spending more time as far as proximity? Is the teacher spending more time with one group than the other?
And that will be linked to the CPD.
Could be. But the ZPD, in fact, is linked not only just from the teacher to the students, but even among the students too. So the stronger students could be considered the more knowledgeable other, okay? And they could actually use scaffolding to scaffold the information too. So it doesn't have to come from the teacher, and that's something that you can discuss and reveal, hopefully in your own research, right? That it's not just the teacher, that they are mediating and scaffolding amongst themselves. So we have recording device, so you'll be doing transcription, so that's another data source. So you have interviews and you have your observations, which include recordings. As far as instruments go, you'll need probably an observation sheet.
I have a sample of an observation sheet.
Okay.
Even I sent it to you this like an hour ago. I don't know
okay.
if you would like to check it, if
Okay, sure.
if it is like appropriate or if it is very general.
And as far as your interviews go, you'll need an interview guide for a semi-structured interview. So think about conducting a semi-structured interview where you have a list of general questions that you can feed off of, and when you have your discussion and you're talking with your teacher, you can formulate different questions related to key terms. All right, so you want to make it as conversational as possible. So it's not just that you're not going from question number one, question number two, but it's more like a conversation. And you can always start really general and just start to get to know. And the hard part about doing a semi-structured interview is really listening and taking information that the respondent is giving you, and then turning that around and directing a question into the areas that you need. So
It is in Google Drive, teacher.
all right.
There was other literature circle like research, and at the end, at the appendix, there is one instrument they use for observation.
Okay.
It is like in the last pages. Because I have some classes, but they are like not really appropriate. No.
Yeah, it's kind of slow
Oh.
here.
There's a chart. It's no much more like at the top. That it's that one. Yes.
So it's kind of like a checklist.
A checklist.
All right. Now there are some questions. I'm just looking here at some of the points, and whatever instrument, whatever observational instrument that you end up using, it needs to allow you to capture the information that you observe, but not. What you don't want to do is analyze while you're observing. You don't want to mix the two. One thing is observing, and the other thing is to analyze. And so when you're looking at some of these, you may have to adapt this because it says here the group discussion stays on topic. Well, you may or may not know when you're observing in the class whether or not they're on topic because you're not going to be able to really hear exactly their conversation. Now, you can determine that later with the recording. But if you're trying to develop an instrument for observing in the class, think of an instrument that facilitates you recording what you see. That is, what are the teachers and students saying? What are the students and teachers doing? What are they doing and what are they saying? Now, obviously, whatever they say is what you can hear, and that will be limited in your case because you're focusing on small groups. Some of you are researching like whole group discussions. When a student raises his hand or her hand, you can record that. But in the other case, you may or may not. Now, you can position yourself as best as possible and try to capture whatever you can. Okay, so if they ask it loud enough for you to hear it, and then maybe the teacher turns it into the whole class discussion, certainly you can record that. But you may not get all of the conversation within each group, which is okay as long as you have a good recording and you can get that later. But you need an observation sheet that helps you capture what you can notice during the observation when you're physically there in the class. So there'll be some of these that may or may not apply, but each group participates in the process of discussion, or each member participates, but that'll be that'll be part of your analysis. That'll be separate. So I think you might be able to use some of these ideas here, but not all of them, depending, on, and one of the things that I recommend is keeping the observation sheet really general, and if you want to, for example, some observation sheets allow you to kind of draw the layout and the positioning of the teachers with in this case, the two groups that you're focusing on. So I think that might be part of what you want to do, is to, whether you just draw it out or you have some sort of scheme, some sort of map already, but that you are basically writing the position of the teacher. And I think there's kind of a way of doing that where you actually draw like arrows and you can write times as far as where the teacher is throughout the class.
Like the position of the different circles and the route of the teacher, and also the time the teacher spends with
exactly. So that's something you can observe, and you find a format that helps you record that. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be very basic, or it could just even be a method, like you're saying. They say, okay, I'll use X's for the groups and a circle for the teacher, and this is how. However you want to do it, whatever system you want is fine. But yeah, I think all those things that you mentioned are important when you observe. Okay, so for next week, why don't you bring in an interview guide, just a few questions that you think will be the focus of your interview, that initial interview. Some sort of observation sheet or method of observing that we've talked about today. And what else? I think we can start with that. Now, if you have something before, we have 4 weeks starting this week. If you have something that you want me to look at beforehand, either send it to me in the email or come by. If it's something that we can look at and handle right away, but I'm going to go at your speed here. So if we come to an agreement on the instruments in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you can go ahead and start your data collection. We don't have to wait 4 more weeks for the data collection. All right, but we need to make sure that we have our instruments right? So
Uh-huh.
it's really going to be up to you as far as how you want to develop these. But know that if we come to an agreement and we work these designs out early, it'll give you more time for the data collection.
Okay.
And you can never have too much time for data collection.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to sound like talkative or something, but I also on the reflection I like set route of activities.
Perfect.
Plan.
Excellent.
So if
That's
you can
good.
check it later.
I'll check
that
it.
would be-
But you don't have to approve that with me or not. This is, for us, we're going in steps. So whenever we have the instruments, if you have them all designed in 1 week and you want to start your data collection next week, that's fine.
So the interview we were talking about, it's first of all the two teachers, right? The two reading teachers to justify why I'm choosing one or the other.
Right. And and it also gives you the peace of mind that you're making a decision that you're choosing a teacher for a reason with the hopes that teacher will give you the information that you need, maybe more so than the other teacher. I don't know. And maybe they're both pretty much the same and then you just choose, right? But the idea is that you have kind of a reason for choosing one and that you are making the best choice based on the situation so that you don't have problems later on. Specifically in this case, that you're sticking with one teacher. And with a case study, the reason we do a case study is to choose a case, in this case a teacher or a group that is in some way unique or in some way different than others. So you really need to choose one group over the other for a reason, because this is a case study. So it's not just eeny, meeny, miny, mo, that it's you chose this group maybe because this teacher says, oh, this group is really difficult. Their level's super low. I have a lot of problems with their reading. Okay. And the other teacher maybe say, oh, well, this group is okay. They're doing fine, or they're really strong students. Well, then maybe you want to teach or focus on the ones that are really having difficulty, right? To see how literature circles can help, if at all, low level or students who struggle. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so be thinking about that, and then from there we'll focus on one teacher, and as we progress we'll be talking about maybe a guide for subsequent interviews.
Okay.
Right, so because that'll change, that'll be more directed towards an actual experience in the classroom, a literature circle that you observed.
Oh, nice.
All right.
So, first of all, I want to create like an interview guide as an instructor one.
Yes.
And I would try to finish this week this like interview
Okay.
guide and show it to you.
Okay. That's
After
fine.
that, if
And
we
also-
made some changes, after that I apply it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I want to get all of our instruments more or less determined, like the design of all of them first.
Okay.
All right. So we'll start with that, and then be thinking about a subsequent interview, like how that might differ. And think about the observation sheet as we mentioned. We need to, if you can show me that, and that's basically it. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Fernando. So I'll see you next week. And again, if you want to discuss something before our next tutoring session, come by. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. All right.
Nice week, teacher.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.